Eli Turner was a young cowboy who had spent most of his life traveling from one ranch to another, looking for work and learning new skills wherever he went. He was known as a polite and hard-working man who minded his own business and respected the land he rode across. One summer, he decided to travel through Arizona, a place he had never visited before. People had told him the land was beautiful, but also difficult, with long stretches of dry earth, silent mountains, and winds that could change the weather in a heartbeat. Eli enjoyed the quiet of the land at first. He rode his horse slowly across the dusty plains and listened to the soft sounds of the wind moving through the bushes. He carried only what he needed: water, dried food, a bedroll, and a few tools. He planned to reach a ranch far to the west, where he hoped to find steady work. He felt confident because he had traveled alone many times before. But even the most experienced traveler could not predict everything. One afternoon, the sky changed suddenly. A light wind became stronger, and the air turned thick with dust. Eli looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but the sky darkened too fast. A sandstorm was forming, larger and more dangerous than any he had seen. His horse became uneasy, its ears twitching at the sound of the distant roar. Eli tried to guide it to a safer direction, but the storm moved quicker than he expected. Within minutes, everything around him turned into swirling dust. He could barely see his own hands. He bent low over the saddle and tried to move forward, but the wind pushed harder, forcing him to stop. His horse panicked, and before Eli could calm it down, the animal stumbled. Eli fell onto the ground, the wind hitting him like a wall. He crawled, trying to protect his face, but the dust stung his skin and filled his eyes. He tried to call for his horse, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. The last thing he remembered was the sound of rushing wind as he lost consciousness. When Eli opened his eyes again, everything was quiet. The storm was gone. Instead of dust and wind, he saw the ceiling of a small lodge built of wood and branches. The air smelled faintly of herbs, his head felt heavy, and his throat was painfully dry. He tried to sit up, but a gentle hand stopped him. When he turned to look, he saw a young Apache woman kneeling beside him, her expression calm but focused. Her name was Nayeli. She had found him lying in the sand early that morning while gathering plants near the edge of her village. She could tell he was weak from dehydration, so she brought him back to her settlement with the help of her younger brother. She offered him water and let him rest until the heat of the day faded. Eli thanked her with a quiet voice, still trying to make sense of where he was. He noticed that the lodge was simple but welcoming. A small fire burned near the center, and bundles of dried herbs hung from the walls. Nayeli moved gracefully as she prepared a herbal drink for him. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes showed kindness mixed with caution. She had grown up learning healing practices from her grandmother, who had taught her how to treat the sick and care for strangers with respect. Eli drank the warm mixture Nayeli gave him. It tasted earthy but soothing. He felt strength returning to his body. Nayeli told him he had been unconscious for several hours and that the storm had been one of the strongest of the season. She knew he had been lucky to survive it. Eli asked about his horse, and Nayeli assured him that her brother had gone to search. She encouraged him to rest in the lodge until he was fully recovered. At first, Eli felt unsure. He did not want to trouble her family or appear ungrateful, but he quickly realized he had no choice. He was still too weak to travel, and the land outside was unfamiliar. Over the next 2 days, Eli recovered slowly. Nayeli checked on him often, bringing him water and simple meals made from corn and herbs. She spoke softly and patiently, explaining parts of her culture and daily life whenever he asked. Eli listened with respect, wanting to understand the world she came from. He learned that her people lived in harmony with the land, taking only what they needed and giving thanks for everything they used. Nayeli told him stories. Her grandmother had passed down stories about the mountains, the animals, and the spirits believed to guide their people. Eli found these stories peaceful and comforting, even though they were different from what he had grown up with. As the sun set each evening, the air around the settlement filled with soft colors: orange, pink, and purple blending together over the desert sky. Eli sat outside the lodge when he was strong enough, watching the silhouettes of the mountains in the distance. Nayeli often sat with him, weaving small pieces of cloth or preparing herbs. Their conversations were gentle and simple. They talked about work, travel, and the challenges each had faced in life. Eli shared stories of long days on cattle ranches, where he would ride for hours under the heat, guide herds across rivers, and sleep under the open sky. Nayeli listened with interest. Imagining a world so different from her own, she asked him what freedom meant to a cowboy. Eli smiled and said that freedom was riding wherever the trail led, but also knowing when to slow down and appreciate the quiet moments. Nayeli told him that in her culture, freedom came from understanding nature and finding balance between movement and stillness. Eli admired her wisdom and the calm way she spoke. He felt that she saw the world in a deeper way than most people he had met. By the third day, Eli had regained much of his strength. Nayeli's brother finally returned with news that Eli's horse had survived the storm and was grazing near a stream not far from the village. Eli felt relieved and thanked Nayeli's family for their kindness. The tribe had treated him not as a stranger but as someone who needed help, and that touched him deeply. Although thankful and ready to continue his journey, Eli felt a quiet sadness when he thought about leaving. He had grown comfortable in Nayeli's presence. Her calm voice, her patient care, and the gentle way she moved had become familiar to him in a short time. He knew he could not stay forever, but he also knew that meeting her had changed something inside him. On the morning of his departure, Nayeli prepared a small pouch of herbs for him to take along. She told him the herbs would help him stay strong on the road. Eli accepted the gift with gratitude. He looked at Nayeli, wanting to say more, but words felt heavy and unsure. Instead, he simply thanked her for everything she had done. Nayeli nodded softly, understanding what he could not say. As Eli mounted his horse, he looked back at the village one last time. Nayeli stood near the lodge, her hair moving with the light breeze. Their eyes met, and though they did not speak, both felt the weight of the moment. It was a quiet farewell, filled with unspoken thoughts. Eli turned his horse and began to ride away, the sound of hooves breaking the gentle silence. The land stretched wide before him, but his mind stayed fixed on the small settlement behind him and the girl who had saved his life. He wondered if their paths would ever cross again, or if this brief encounter would remain only a memory, one special moment in the long trail of his life. As the sun climbed higher and the desert warmed beneath him, Eli realized something important. Sometimes, a single meeting, even a short one, could leave a mark deeper than years of traveling. And somewhere behind him, Nayeli also stood quietly, watching the fading dust trail left by the cowboy she had rescued, feeling the same unexplainable connection. Their worlds were far apart, yet for a short time, they had shared a small piece of life together. Both carried that moment with them as they walked back into their own journeys, unaware of how important that meeting would become in the future. After Eli left the Apache settlement, the days slowly returned to their normal rhythm for everyone except Nayeli. She tried to continue her daily tasks, gathering herbs, helping elders, teaching younger children simple healing practices, but something inside her felt different. She often found herself remembering the short time Eli had spent in the village, the gentle way he spoke, and the quiet respect he showed toward her people. She had cared for many travelers before, but Eli had left a calm yet powerful impression on her. Weeks passed, and summer began to shift toward cooler nights. The season of harvest was approaching, and the village grew busier as families prepared food and stored supplies. One morning, Nayeli woke with a strange heaviness in her body. She felt tired, more than usual. Her grandmother, who had spent her life observing the smallest signs in people, noticed immediately. Her grandmother asked her to sit and tell her what she felt. Nayeli spoke honestly, explaining the tiredness, the unusual warmth in her body, and the quiet changes she had noticed. Her grandmother listened with calm eyes, nodding slowly, and then placed a gentle hand on Nayeli's shoulder. After a long moment, she told her what Nayeli had not yet dared to consider. She was expecting a child. The words settled on Nayeli like soft but surprising snowfall. She stayed quiet for a long time, absorbing the truth. She knew immediately whose child it was, Eli's. Their connection had been brief but deep, and now it had created a new life. Her grandmother reassured her, reminding her that every child brought purpose, and that she should not be afraid. Still, Nayeli felt unsure. Her people were accepting and close-knit, but a child whose father came from a very different world could bring questions. She wondered how her family and the rest of the tribe would react. She also wondered if Eli, wandering somewhere far away, had any idea what future was forming without his knowledge. When Nayeli told her mother, the reaction was a mix of worry and understanding. Her mother held her hands firmly and told her that strength came from facing life honestly, not from hiding from it. She reminded Nayeli that she was loved, and that the family would guide her. Her father was more surprised, but after a long talk with Nayeli's grandmother, he accepted the situation. He trusted Nayeli's heart, and believed she would raise the child with the same dignity she carried in her own life. As news slowly spread in the village, people reacted differently. Some offered warm smiles and blessings. Others whispered among themselves, not out of cruelty, but out of curiosity. A child linked to the outside world was unusual, but no one treated Nayeli unkindly. They simply wondered how this child would fit between two worlds, Apache traditions, and the unknown life of the cowboy who had passed through like a traveling breeze. Months passed, and Nayeli's pregnancy grew. She stayed strong, continuing to help others and walk the familiar paths around the village. But her pregnancy was not ordinary. Midwives noticed that the baby grew faster than expected. They told Nayeli the child seemed incredibly strong, moving with energy even before the 7th month. Her grandmother, who had seen more births than anyone else, spoke quietly of children who were born with special destinies, children who came into the world carrying gifts from both parents. Word spread beyond the village. Travelers passing through carried rumors to nearby settlements. Some said Nayeli was expecting a large child, strong and healthy. Others created stories that the baby was blessed by nature itself. None of these tales were harmful, but they created an air of mystery around Nayeli's unborn child. Nayeli tried not to think about the rumors. She focused on staying healthy, listening to advice from the midwives, and preparing a small space in her family's lodge where the baby would sleep. Sometimes at night, when the world outside had gone quiet and the stars shone like silver dust, she sat alone and wondered about Eli. Did he remember her? Did he ever think about the time they shared? She had no way to send him a message, no way to reach him. The land between them was wide and unpredictable. All she could do was trust that whatever was meant to happen would happen at the right time. Meanwhile, Eli was far to the west, working on a ranch near the foothills. He had found steady work, herding cattle across open fields and helping repair fences. The days were long, and his body was often tired, but his mind wandered often more than he wanted to admit. He remembered Nayeli's peaceful expression, her calm voice, and the gift of herbs she had given him. He kept the small pouch with him, tied securely inside his saddlebag. Sometimes, when he rested at night, he looked at it and felt a quiet ache he could not fully explain. He told himself that their meeting had been unexpected and that his life was meant to continue on the road. But part of him felt unfinished, as if a piece of his heart had stayed behind in that small settlement. He did not know why he felt this way so strongly. All he knew was that he thought of Nayeli far more often than he had expected. Back in the Apache settlement, Nayeli's pregnancy reached its final months, and the baby's strength became even more noticeable. Midwives sometimes placed their hands gently on her stomach and exchanged surprised glances with each other. The child kicked with unusual force, as if eager to enter the world. Her grandmother said the baby's spirit was powerful and that she should not fear anything. But Nayeli still felt pressure, not from the people around her, but from her own thoughts. She wondered how she would raise a child who carried two identities. She wondered if the tribe would always accept him without question. She wondered if Eli would ever learn about his child or if he would continue traveling, unaware of the life he had helped create. One evening, as she sat outside her lodge watching the sky turn golden, her grandmother sat beside her. The older woman rarely spoke without reason, and her presence alone brought comfort. After a long silence, her grandmother said something that stayed with Nayeli. Children choose their parents before they arrive. This child chose you for your courage and your kindness. And he chose his father for reasons we may not yet understand. There is no burden here, only a path that will reveal itself with time. Nayeli nodded, letting the words settle into her heart like warm sunlight. As the final month approached, the village came together to support her. Women helped prepare soft blankets and baskets for the baby. Men offered to gather extra firewood for her lodge. Children asked questions with wide, curious eyes. And through all of it, Nayeli walked calmly, carrying her child with a sense of quiet determination. She felt stronger than she had ever felt before. The night before her labor began, she had a dream. She stood on a wide plain where the sky touched the earth. In the dream, she saw a child standing at the center of the plain, strong and bright, like a beam of sunlight. The boy looked at her with familiar eyes, Eli's eyes. Then the dream faded into soft darkness. When she awoke, she felt a deep certainty. Something special was coming. By morning, her grandmother confirmed that the signs of labor were beginning. The midwives prepared the lodge, lighting a warm fire and arranging herbs. The entire community moved with a sense of anticipation. Everyone knew that this birth would not be like others, not because of rumors, but because of the journey Nayeli had taken to reach this moment. As Nayeli lay down to rest before the pains grew stronger, she placed her hand on her stomach and whispered a quiet promise to her child. She promised to protect him, to teach him, and to give him all the love she carried in her heart. And she wondered, one last time, if Eli would ever know the truth waiting to unfold. While she rested, the wind outside shifted gently, as if carrying a message across the desert toward a cowboy far away, who felt a sudden and unexplained tug at his heart. Neither of them knew it yet, but the story that began with a brief meeting was about to grow larger than. Nayeli woke before sunrise with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness in her chest. She had felt small pains during the night, but now they had grown stronger and more steady. The sky outside was still dark, the stars dimming as the first light of morning touched the desert. She listened to the quiet of her family's lodge, hearing the soft breathing of her grandmother nearby. When another wave of pain came, she held the blanket and took a slow breath, just as the midwives had taught her. Her grandmother opened her eyes almost immediately, as if she had sensed the moment. She moved closer, placed a warm hand on Nayeli's forehead, and gave a gentle nod. There was no panic, no fear, only calm acceptance. Her grandmother whispered that the time had come and that the child was ready to meet the world. The lodge quickly filled with quiet movement. Nayeli's mother lit a small fire for warmth. The midwives arrived, their voices soft but confident as they prepared herbs, water, clean cloth, and everything needed for the long hours ahead. Outside, the village slowly came alive, though no one made loud noises. People understood that this day was special. They stepped lightly, spoke quietly, and carried a sense of respect as they went about their early morning chores. As the sun climbed above the horizon, Nayeli's labor grew stronger. She tried to stay steady, reminding herself of all the strength she had seen in her people, in her grandmother, and in the women who had brought life into the world before her. She knew she was not alone. The presence of her family, the midwives, and even the warm fire comforted her. Whenever the pain became too much, her grandmother held her hand, whispering soft words in their native language, words about courage and love and the path of all mothers. Time moved slowly, as if the world outside had forgotten to push the day forward. Hours passed. The midwives checked the baby's progress and exchanged surprised looks, just as they had during the pregnancy. The child was strong, very strong, and larger than they expected for a newborn, but they did not speak loudly about it. They simply prepared themselves with extra care. Whenever Nayeli closed her eyes, she pictured the dream she had seen the night before. She imagined the child standing under the open sky, confident and bright. Remembering that dream gave her hope and focus. It reminded her that this child carried something powerful inside him, something meant to be shared with the world. By midday, the labor became harder, and the pains came quicker. Sweat covered her forehead, and her breathing grew heavy. The midwives encouraged her softly, telling her she was doing well. Her grandmother placed wet cloths on her face and helped her sit up whenever the midwives asked her to. Between the waves of pain, Nayeli thought of Eli. She remembered the quiet warmth of his voice, the gentle way he listened to her stories, and the rare softness in his eyes. She wondered again if she would ever see him, and if he would ever know the truth of this day, but she pushed the thought away gently, reminding herself that her focus needed to be on the child and the moment happening right now. As the sun began to lower, turning the sky golden, the midwives finally told her that the baby was ready. A deep mix of relief and fear washed through her. She held onto her grandmother's hand as the last and hardest part of her labor began. The midwives guided her carefully, speaking with calm voices full of knowledge. The fire crackled quietly, casting warm light on the lodge walls. Then, after what felt like forever, a moment of pure stillness came. One of the midwives leaned closer, her expression changing from concentration to amazed joy. She looked at Nayeli with wide eyes and a gentle smile, telling her that her child was here. When the newborn's cry filled the lodge, the sound was strong and full, stronger than any they had ever heard from a baby. It was not harsh or frightening, but powerful. As if the child had arrived with a great breath of life, the midwives lifted him carefully and wrapped him in a soft cloth before handing him to Nayeli. Nayeli's breath caught when she saw him for the first time. The baby was larger than any newborn she had ever seen in her village. His arms and legs were thick and warm, and his face was round with a healthy glow. He looked strong, far stronger than any child born in their tribe's recent memory. But more than his size, what struck her the most was his presence. Even as a newborn, he seemed full of energy and life, as if he carried more than just a tiny beating heart inside him. The midwives exchanged soft whispers, still surprised but full of admiration. They said the child was born with a spirit that seemed older and wiser than his first breath. One of them even said that she had never felt such energy from a newborn. Another touched his tiny hand and remarked that he gripped her finger with strength far beyond his age. When Nayeli held her son close, she felt a wave of emotion, love, relief, amazement, and something deeper, something that felt like destiny. The baby calmed immediately in her arms, his breathing slow and steady. She studied his face carefully, noticing small details that reminded her of Eli, the shape of the nose, the softness of the eyebrows, the way his cheeks rounded gently. It felt as if Eli's presence had returned through this new life. Her grandmother looked at the child with deep respect. She said the baby was huge, not just in body, but in spirit. She said he carried the strength of two worlds, his mother's heritage and his father's unknown journey. She told Nayeli that the child would bring connection, understanding, and healing between people who did not often meet. Outside the lodge, word of the birth had already spread. People gathered quietly near the entrance, waiting to hear if everything had gone well. When the midwives stepped outside and shared the news, the entire village exhaled with relief. There was no loud celebration, but there was an unspoken joy that passed from person to person. Some people whispered with wonder about the newborn's size. Others simply smiled warmly, saying that the child would grow to be a strong young boy. Elders bowed their heads, sensing that the birth marked something meaningful for the village. Children asked their parents if they could see the new baby, but everyone agreed that Nayeli needed rest first. Inside the lodge, Nayeli finally lay back, exhausted but deeply happy. Her son rested against her chest, his small breaths warm against her skin. Her grandmother placed a blanket over both of them and whispered blessings for their future. Nayeli looked at her son again and felt an indescribable connection. She could not explain it with words, but she knew her life had changed forever. She also felt the quiet responsibility of raising a child who might grow between two cultures. But instead of fear, she felt courage. She promised herself she would teach him everything she knew: how to be kind, how to be wise, how to respect the land, and how to walk with strength. As night fell, the lodge became quiet. The fire glowed softly, and the sounds of the village faded into the gentle wind outside. The midwives cleaned up their supplies, speaking softly so as not to disturb the mother and child. One by one, they stepped outside, leaving only the warmth of the fire and the heartbeat of the newborn. Nayeli watched her son sleep, his tiny hands curled near his cheeks. She brushed her fingers across his soft hair, feeling the softness of his beginning. She whispered his name, Talon, a name her grandmother helped choose, a name that symbolized strength, speed, and the ability to rise high. As she whispered the name, the baby stirred slightly, as if recognizing it. In that quiet moment, the world outside felt still and peaceful. A new life had begun. A new chapter had opened, and though Nayeli did not know what challenges or surprises the future would bring, she held her son with a heart full of hope. Far away, under the same night sky, Eli Turner suddenly felt a strange pull in his chest, an unexplainable warmth, as if something important had just entered the world. Neither he nor Nayeli knew it yet, but the birth that had taken place that evening would change the direction of both their lives forever. Eli Turner was working on the ranch when the trader arrived that afternoon. The man had ridden in with a wagon full of supplies, tools, blankets, herbs, and small items from different settlements. Ranch workers always came to listen to the trader's stories because travelers often carried news from faraway places. Eli didn't usually pay much attention to gossip, but as he brushed his horse, he heard something that made him stop completely. The trader mentioned a story spreading across the region about an Apache woman who had recently given birth to a baby boy unlike any newborn people had seen in years. The baby was strong, big, and healthy, so healthy that neighboring tribes had begun talking about him as if he were a sign of good fortune. The trader said the mother was a young healer named Nayeli. The moment her name slipped from the trader's mouth, Eli felt the air leave his chest. He dropped the brush from his hand and turned to face the trader, asking him to repeat what he had said. The trader, surprised by Eli's sudden seriousness, explained the story again in simple words. Eli stood silently, trying to understand. The trader knew nothing else, only that the woman lived in an Apache settlement not far from where Eli had been months ago, and that the child had become the subject of many soft-spoken conversations. Eli listened with a racing heart, his mind moving faster than his thoughts could keep up. He tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking. Something deep inside him told him that the child the trader spoke about was his. The connection he had felt with Nayeli, the sense of something unfinished, the strange warmth he had felt one night for no reason, it all suddenly made sense. Life had been moving forward without him knowing it. He didn't wait another minute. He thanked the ranch owner for the work he had been given, returned the tools he had borrowed, and packed his few belongings. The owner tried to ask him why he was leaving so suddenly, but Eli simply said he had something important to take care of. There was no anger, no rushing confusion, only a quiet urgency that pushed him forward. With his horse saddled and water packed, Eli rode out before the sun began to set. He headed east, toward Apache land. He had no real map, only memory and instinct. But he trusted both. He had traveled difficult lands before. This time, though, every mile carried weight. He didn't know what would happen when he reached the settlement. He didn't know if he would be welcomed or turned away. He didn't even know if Nayeli wanted to see him. And yet, he had to go. His heart allowed no other choice. The journey took several days. Eli slept under open skies, eating light meals, and stopping only when his horse needed rest. During the quiet hours of the night, he looked up at the stars and wondered what Nayeli was doing. Was she holding the baby? Was she thinking of him? Did she hope he would return, or did she fear he might? On the fourth day, he reached the familiar land that he remembered from before. The shapes of the mountains, the paths, the sound of the wind, it all felt like stepping back into a memory. But as he approached the Apache settlement, he slowed his horse. He knew he had to show respect. He dismounted, walked beside his horse, and kept his posture calm. He wanted to make sure he looked like someone seeking peace, not trouble. A few Apache men noticed him approaching. Their expressions turned cautious. One of them stepped forward and raised a hand for Eli to stop. Eli did not try to move closer. He greeted them politely, speaking slowly and clearly. He said he had come to see Nayeli if she wished to see him. He did not claim anything, did not demand anything. He simply asked for the chance to speak with her. The men watched him carefully. They whispered to each other. One of them recognized Eli from months before, remembering that Nayeli had saved him during the sandstorm. That recognition softened the situation slightly, but there was still caution, as there always was with outsiders. After a short pause, one of the men went to inform Nayeli. Eli waited calmly, holding the reins of his horse, feeling the nervous beat of his own heart. Every passing moment felt longer than the last. Dust drifted lightly across the ground, and the sky above the settlement swung between afternoon brightness and gentle shade. Finally, the man returned. He signaled for Eli to follow. Eli walked behind him, feeling the weight of every step. The moment he entered the inner part of the settlement, he saw her. Nayeli stood near the doorway of her family's lodge, holding a baby wrapped in soft cloth. She looked the same, and yet completely changed. Motherhood had added a quiet glow to her. Her eyes, warm and calm, widened when she saw Eli approaching. Their first moment of eye contact felt like the world around them had stopped moving. Eli stood a few feet away, not wanting to rush toward her. He removed his hat respectfully and spoke softly, telling her he had heard about the child and came as soon as he could. Nayeli looked down at her baby, then back at Eli. Her expression held many emotions: relief, surprise, uncertainty, and something else that she had never said aloud but always carried quietly inside her heart. At last, she nodded and stepped aside, inviting him to come closer. When Eli finally stood in front of her, he looked at the baby. The child's eyes were bright and curious, and his little hands moved with surprising strength. Eli felt something powerful inside him, something warm, something overwhelming, something that filled his entire chest. He whispered a quiet greeting to the baby, and the baby blinked, as if studying him with interest. Nayeli told Eli the child's name. Talon. Eli repeated the name softly, letting the sound settle on his tongue like something sacred. Nayeli then offered him a chance to hold the baby. Eli hesitated at first, unsure if he deserved the moment. But Nayeli nodded with gentle assurance. He placed his hat aside and held the child carefully, supporting the baby's weight with both arms. Talon looked up at him with wide eyes, as if he knew exactly who Eli was. In that moment, Eli felt something change inside him forever. Everything he had done before, every mile he had ridden, none of it carried the meaning that this tiny life now held. Over the next days, the village slowly accepted his presence. Eli helped where he could, carrying water, fixing tools, guiding horses, and learning the rhythms of daily life. He did not try to prove himself loudly. He showed respect through actions, patience, and quiet effort. The people of the settlement noticed. They saw sincerity, not pride. Eli spent long hours with Nayeli and Talon. He learned how to hold the baby, how to calm him, and how to make him smile with small gestures. Nayeli watched Eli with a calm heart, seeing how naturally he cared for their son. She saw that he was not there out of guilt or pressure, but out of genuine love and responsibility. As the weeks passed, the settlement began to view Eli not as a stranger, but as someone who had chosen to be part of something larger than himself. Children approached him without fear, asking him questions about horses and ranch work. Elders nodded at him with a little more softness each passing day. One afternoon, Eli and Nayeli stood together at the edge of the settlement, watching the sunset. The sky was filled with colors: deep orange, soft pink, fading purple. Talon slept peacefully in Nayeli's arms, his tiny breaths quiet and steady. Eli looked at Nayeli with a gentle expression. He told her that he wanted to stay near them, to help raise their child, and to build a life that connected both of their worlds. Nayeli listened silently, her eyes reflecting both hope and caution. She told him she needed time, not because she doubted him, but because building trust was a slow, meaningful process. Eli understood and agreed. He was not in a hurry. He had already decided that his life now had a new purpose. Over the next months, the family bond grew naturally. Talon grew quickly, his strength matching the stories told about him. He learned to reach, grasp, smile, and laugh earlier than expected. Villagers often said he was born with a strong spirit, and when he grew older, he would carry lessons from both cultures, Apache wisdom and cowboy courage. Years later, Eli, Nayeli, and Talon would often stand together on a quiet hill overlooking the valley. They would watch the land stretch far and wide, knowing that their lives had changed because of a single, unexpected meeting during a storm. The story that began with one night had grown into a life that belonged to all three of them, a life built with patience, respect, and a love that crossed more than distance. And though none of them knew what the future would bring, they faced it together, united by a bond that was larger than the journey that first brought them together.